some people, because of emotional invalidation or because of experiences of abuse or neglect or consistent chronic trauma, they may shut down emotionally and develop an avoidant attachment style because their needs are constantly overlooked.
Meet Alicia Meneses-Maples.
You're here. I am so happy to see you.
Her TEDx talk has set a global viral trend about glass children. She's helped millions of hurting glass children around the world feel seen. You've seen her on NBC, CNN.com, and countless online articles. Here is your host, Alicia Meneses-Maples.
Welcome to the I See Glass Children podcast. This is the place where we boldly dig into all things related to the glass child experience. We own our stories without shame, we pursue our healing, and we claim our value independent of others' thoughts, feelings, or expectations. Because you are important to me, I have to give you a warning. Some of the things you hear on the I See Glass Children podcast may be triggering for you, especially if you experience childhood trauma and neglect. And while I will occasionally have mental health professionals as special guests, I am not a licensed therapist, and this podcast is never meant to be a substitute for a supportive and healing relationship with a professional counselor. I'm your host, Alicia Meneses-Maples. I am a glass child, and I see you. So is being a glass child really a thing? Or, as some people say, is it something that was made up just so that whiny, attention-seeking people could receive affirmation and dopamine hits from the internet? This episode answers that question. If you grew up learning to suppress your needs, anticipate others' moods, or become whoever you had to be just to keep the peace, your understanding of love and connection may have been shaped by survival instead of safety. Today, we're talking about something foundational for emotional well-being, attachment, and more specifically, how attachment patterns from childhood can quietly run the show in our adult relationships until we learn to see them. Today, I'm joined by Megan Rodriguez, a mental health professional who specializes in helping people untangle unhealthy attachment patterns and reconnect with the truth of who they truly are. In this episode, we'll explore what attachment really means, what insecure or anxious attachment can look like in adult life, and why so many of us were never taught to recognize our own feelings, let alone trust them. This isn't about blaming the past, it's about getting honest with it so we can choose how we want to live, how we want to love, and how we want to relate to others going forward. If you've ever asked yourself, why do I lose myself in all my relationships? This conversation is for you. Let's begin. We find ourselves in one of these two patterns of maladaptive behavior where we either make everything in the world all about us, or we make everything in the world about everybody else so that we can find the validation that we were missing when we were children.
Right.
What happens next?
Well, I think another thing that's important to point out about this ego deficient pattern is that what it oftentimes leads to is a lot of people-pleasing behaviors, right? I people please, I overachieve, and my value comes from being able to do those things. And so as a result of that, relationships aren't safe. It's not okay to put all my trust in a relationship, because if I put all my trust in relationship, I'm going to get burned somehow. So if I'm a people pleaser, what's going to end up happening is I'm going to have boundary violation after boundary violation because I don't express my needs or my emotions. So how can I expect the other person to understand my needs and my emotions? And then I start to realize that relationships aren't going to be protective of me after all. I'm gaining that emotional validation, but the holes are still there because you're going to do something eventually that's going to take that validation away from me because we're humans and humans make mistakes and humans hurt each other.
Right.
What often happens in these situations? So you said you're excited to get to attachment. This leads to an insecure attachment style.
What is attachment? What does that mean?
Attachment is my ability to have a relationship with you. So my feeling of connectedness, my interpersonal relationships with others, the way that I'm able to build those interpersonal relationships with others, my ability to feel safe and secure in a relationship with another person.
So like my ability to trust, to connect, to be vulnerable, to find joy, those kinds of things. All of that is wrapped up in attachment.
Exactly.
All right.
Yes. So ideally, in a perfect world, our parents would have given us the emotional validation that we needed. We would have had our needs met when we experienced traumatic events. We would have known that we can be protected and that we are safe. We have the value to be protected and safe. And that would lead to a secure attachment style on my part. So some of the hallmarks of a secure attachment style is that my parents have made an effort to provide emotional support to all their children. The glass child, the child with the higher needs, everyone. And so then that glass child would develop a secure attachment style. This would require validation of their emotions. It would be ensuring that they feel seen, even if their sibling requires extra attention. And as I grow into adulthood, what that looks like is that I can enter into a healthy adult relationship with another person. And I know that I have value in that relationship. So I'm able to establish boundaries within the relationship. I'm able to express my emotions in that relationship. I know that the other person is somebody who is safe for me to rely upon in that relationship. So things that might lead to an insecure attachment style, fear of abandonment. So early trauma can create some deep-seated fears of being rejected or abandoned. And that could often lead to clingy behaviors. So what you would see in more of an anxious attachment style or avoidant behaviors in relationships, because I don't know if you're going to leave me. I can't really rely upon you. There's also this difficulty trusting others. So fearing that others will hurt or betray us, because that's been my experience in relationships so far. Like I said earlier, that emotional dysregulation. So what seems like overreactions to certain situations, intense emotions, anger that seems over the top, or anxiety that just doesn't really seem to be rooted in reality, or shame that doesn't seem to be justified. That can be hard, make it hard to maintain stable relationships as I grow. And then this hypervigilance in relationships. So people who have had complex trauma or who have been through emotionally invalidating experiences early on, they may be constantly scanning for signs of danger. Oh no, you're going to leave me. Oh no, I can't really trust that you're going to take care of me. Oh no, I don't know what your reaction to this is going to be. And so it makes it difficult for me to feel safe with others. And I'm constantly hypervigilant for the put downs. I'm hypervigilant for signs of abandonment. And then self-worth issues, right? So this negative self-perception that can lead to this self-sabotage in relationships or an unsettled relationship because, well, why would anybody want to be with me?
I sabotage the relationship to end it before the other person gets a chance to end it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The things that you have just listed, all of those things kind of blowing my mind. I want to step back for just a second and process through some of those. So the hypervigilance, Megan, that is something that comes up in almost every conversation that I have with adult class children. And it's not necessarily hypervigilance around abandonment. It's more hypervigilance around, I need to manage everybody's emotions. So I'm paying attention to body language. I'm paying attention to sounds. I'm paying attention to, I did an interview with a young lady from Chile, and her hypervigilance manifested in being in her room and being so attuned to footsteps in the hallway.
Mm.
If her father's footsteps were heavy and fast, it meant there was going to be an angry explosion. If her mother's footsteps were a certain thing, then it meant that she needed to get prepared for a reaction or something that she was going to have to take care of. I've heard this over and over again from adult class children, this idea of, for me to manage everybody's emotions, I need to be aware of exactly how everyone is feeling and what they're thinking and look at their body language, the nuances in their communication or intonation, their size, etc. And it's it's sad to me because it's something that, from what they have described, they have a very hard time extricating themselves from that pattern of behavior. It's just like on automation, and it's not something that they feel that they can have control over.
Right. It's that constant need to protect themselves. I have to protect myself by maintaining the peace, maintaining homeostasis, right? The status quo in our family relationships. And so that's the role that I developed early on in life. And as I developed that role, I realized subconsciously that that kept me safe.
Yeah, that's very true.
And
That's
so it only makes sense that I'm going to take that into the other relationships. Okay, well, that's the thing that we do. In order to protect ourselves in a relationship, I have to make sure that everybody else is okay too. And if everybody else is okay, then I'm safe and I'm secure and I'm not going to be alone.
yeah. Wow. So I'm going to tell on myself a little bit for the benefit of the adult glass child audience. So I'm married to a wonderful man, and I can tell all kinds of funny, crazy stories, wonderful stories. But the one that's popping into my brain right now is, we had a big argument that led to a big breakthrough for me and then for both of us. So, number one, when he and I first started dating, I remember he said to me, Alicia, there are going to be times that we're going to hurt each other, but it's okay because we'll be okay. And I remember looking at him and thinking, that is the stupidest, I've never heard anything so ridiculous. Like, we're going to hurt each other and it's going to be okay. No. Um, and we had this argument, and he was so angry with me, and he said, I have the right to be angry. Why are you trying to minimize my anger? You are so passive aggressive, Alicia. And I just went, oh, like that was the worst thing that anybody could have ever said to me. I was so hurt, and we just kind of went our separate ways and took some space. And Megan, I thought about the conversation and I realized that he was right. And
Mm.
I did not like hearing that I was passive aggressive because I can't stand that trait in other people. I want people to be very direct and honest with me. And so it bothered me when he said that, but I realized he was right. That was what I was doing. I had an issue with anger and with his anger. And because I was uncomfortable with it
Mm-hmm.
because of my stuff,
Right.
I was minimizing his emotions, which was not fair to him.
Mm-hmm.
And I was expressing it passive aggressively. And the big aha for me was that I was doing to him by minimizing his emotions what my parents had done to me when I was growing up.
Wow.
And that was a massive realization for me. And it's made a big difference in our marriage. So there you go, folks.
It's so helpful. You know, when we have been through experiences that have taught us a certain way to be in a relationship that may be maladaptive to maintaining relationships, it's so helpful to be able to have another person who's walking alongside us who knows how to handle their emotions, right? And maybe not always, because we all have difficulty with that sometimes, but somebody who can look at things and offer you security in a different way than what you've grown accustomed. And
Exactly.
it sounds like that's what he was able to give you in that
I
moment.
I was so thankful that he was able to articulate that in the heat of our major frustration with each other.
Mhm.
I was so grateful because it led to a lot of introspection for both of us. But I can just talk about myself, introspection for me, and shining a light on this pattern of behavior that I was engaged in, that I had no idea that I was engaged in, which was minimizing difficult emotions. And dadgum, I don't want to do to other people what has been done, what was done to me. Absolutely not. So
Sure.
you had mentioned earlier that there are different types of attachment styles,
Mhm.
and we may have touched on them, but if you could talk a little bit more about those, and
Mhm.
then I'd like us to talk about what we do next.
Absolutely. So we talked about a secure attachment style, right? So a secure attachment is I know that I am safe and I'm able to be emotionally supported in a relationship. I can rely upon another person in a relationship to be there for me. I have the value to expect somebody else to be there for me also, FYI. And and so I can validate their emotions, they can validate my emotions. And I know that it's okay to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling in a relationship. So that's a secure attachment style. Another attachment style that I think we see often is an avoidant attachment style. So some people, because of emotional invalidation or because of experiences of abuse or neglect or consistent chronic trauma, they may shut down emotionally and develop an avoidant attachment style because their needs are constantly overlooked. So they learn how to suppress their emotions and become overly independent in a relationship. So you see in adulthood struggles with intimacy in the relationship, and not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy. My ability to feel vulnerable with you so that we can develop an emotional connection with each other. Because of that fear of relying on others, will eventually lead to disappointment or abandonment in some way.
Mm. Mm. Are there other types of attachment?
So that's an avoidant attachment style. We also very often see an anxious attachment style. So a child in this situation, they may develop an anxious attachment style if they feel emotionally neglected or they struggle to gain their parents' attention in some way. So that's the people pleasers that you see, always trying to be good to avoid stressing out their already burdened parents. Fear of abandonment and a heightened sensitivity to rejection. So my anxiety seems overwhelming. It seems like it doesn't really match the situation. Or my sensitivity to any kind of what might be seen as criticism may be overly developed because of that inconsistent parental availability. My need to constantly be good for you. So in adulthood, what that manifests itself looking like in adult relationships are those people who are hyper vigilant for you to leave me in some kind of way. So I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to people please. I'm going to overachieve. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that you see how important I am to you in your life. And then if I see anything that might make me fear that you're going to leave me in some kind of way, I'm going to behave in an anxious manner. So maybe that would look like checking the phone, right? Oh, let me check your call log. Let me check your DMs. And, oh, you don't want to come over tonight? Well, then our relationship must be ending. You must not want to be with me anymore. There's something wrong with me because we didn't want to spend time together tonight. Right. So that increased anxiety in a relationship. And so there's that anxious attachment style. There's that avoidant attachment style. You can see patterns of both. So a person doesn't have to be only anxious, insecure, or only insecure avoidant. It can be an anxious avoidant where sometimes I behave anxiously and I'm very worried about abandonment. And sometimes I need to protect myself because of abandonment, because of that fear of abandonment. I'm going to draw a thicker wall with you and I'm not going to let you in. And then there is one that you see less often. It's more associated with complex PTSD, but you don't see this as often. It's a disorganized attachment style. So if the household is especially chaotic or emotionally unpredictable, so for example, parents are experiencing high stress or grief or emotional dysregulation of their own, the child may develop a disorganized attachment style. So it leads to these conflicting desires. I need closeness with you, but also I fear emotional intimacy with you. So I struggle with trust. I experience this internalized guilt and shame. And I see a lot of increased emotional dysregulation. So a lot more acting out behaviors in a relationship when a disorganized attachment style has been developed.
What do acting out behaviors look like? What pops into my mind is, would that be addiction, substance use? Would that be physical violence? What are we?
So it's more unpredictable behaviors. So, like I said, those conflicting desires, but alternating between anxious and avoidant. And I don't want this is separate from an anxious avoidant attachment style, okay? I want to differentiate because you don't see disorganized attachment as often. This really is more of the extreme experiences of abuse or neglect. But difficulty regulating emotions. So my emotional responses are completely off of, or are completely uncharacteristic of what should be happening in response to whatever the situation is.
So normally my response would be here, but because of the emotional dysregulation, my response is way up here.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
This is all, I'm just going to say, for me, and I hope for other people, I feel like puzzle pieces about my life and about my relationships, my relationship choices I made while I was in relationships, Megan, are starting to make so much sense to me because of this conversation. And I'm very thankful for that. So I'd love for us to talk next about if someone sees themselves in these patterns of behavior that you're describing. I know that the most ideal situation is get into therapy, find someone like you that can walk with you in this journey towards
Mm-hmm.
joy. But what can you share now, today, with the people who are listening who have identified with some of these things that you have described and
Mm-hmm.
they don't know what to do next
Yeah.
to find joy? What advice do you have for them?
I think it's all about learning how to choose ourselves. And let me explain what I mean by that. Learning learning what we need to feel valued, learning what our self-worth is. What is our value based upon? If we have beliefs about what other people's value is based upon, if other people have inherent value just because they're here, then understanding that we also have the same and making decisions that begin to support our value. As we do that, then we start to fill those holes in that emotional bucket of self-worth so that whatever experiences we have start to really fill the bucket for us. So what that might look like for those who are people pleasers, right? Those who have an anxious attachment style, constant victim of boundary violations, is identifying first, what are my needs? What do I need? What are my emotions in whatever the situation is? And now, how do I communicate my needs in a way that can be heard by another person? And then what are the consequences of whatever boundary violations? And what reassurance can I have that it's okay that there are consequences to boundary violations? So establishing healthy boundaries with other people, putting myself first. One of the things that we tend to do is if my value is based upon your assessment of my value, then it's like I'm riding a roller coaster with you.
Exactly. Exactly. And that's why I was saying earlier that really that puts people in dangerous situations and relationships. Maybe not physically dangerous. That's not what I'm trying to say.
And also physically
And
dangerous.
it can be physically dangerous. Yes, that's right. You are giving all of that power to other people, and instead of doing what you're talking about, which is choosing yourself and claiming that power for you. But I've got to stop us for just a second, Megan, because I want us to get really elementary for just a minute.
Mm-hmm.
In all of these conversations that I've had with all of these adult glass children the last several months and the last several years,
Mm-hmm.
the things that you're saying about figuring out how I'm feeling and figuring out what I need, you said those as the first two steps. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's where adult glass children get stuck. Like
Mm-hmm.
they can't even get to the boundaries
Mm-hmm.
because they don't know, like inside themselves, know that it's okay for them to have needs and desires, much less
Right.
identify what those are. So a
Right.
question that I want to ask you is if there is an adult glass child who is listening, who is saying, okay, this is great, Megan, but how do I even start understanding what my needs and desires are? How does that person start?
It has to start with identifying my emotions. Before I can understand my needs, I have to understand what I feel in whatever the situation is. And if I don't know how to put words to that, then I can do something as simple as I'm sitting on my couch in my office right now, and I keep this on my couch all the time.
Oh my
This
God.
is a feelings wheel, and it's a very helpful tool that we can use to help us identify our emotions. So it could be something as simple as getting online and printing out a picture of a feelings wheel and learning how to use a feelings wheel so that, okay, I know I'm angry about whatever it is, but I know that anger isn't the only thing that I feel about whatever this is. So let me look further and let me try to figure out what I'm really feeling down deep inside. So that's the first thing. I have to know what my emotions are before I can understand what my needs are.
Okay. Thank you for getting that basic. I think that some of us need that basic entry level. So step one is identify my feelings. There's an emotions wheel. I also know there is an app that's free that's called How We Feel. And it's fantastic. It's got lots of different types of emotions that you can go and identify. It allows you to journal and do different things like that. I've also heard that journaling is fantastic for kind of puzzling through the process of what it is that we're feeling.
Yeah. There's also a book. There's a book. It's titled Focusing by Eugene Gendlin. And that's another helpful resource just to help you learn how to identify your emotions.
All right. So, step one, we're going to identify our emotions. Yay, emotions. We are pro feelings. All right. So, then step two, you said, is identify our needs and desires.
Right.
What does that process look like?
Right. So if I understand what I'm feeling in a situation, so for example, if I am in a situation at work, let's say I have trouble saying no to tasks at work, and my boss knows this about me, and so my boss keeps heaping more and more on. I first identify what I feel about that. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling neglected. I'm feeling unseen. I'm feeling devalued. Um, and I'm feeling stressed out. So I'm feeling all of these things. And these are all difficult emotions for me to feel. They're not things we want to feel. And so as a result, I want to move to, I don't want to feel so stressed out. And I want to feel happy when I come to work. And I want to know that you value me here at my job. And so what do I need in order to feel those things? Maybe what that is I need fewer tasks. So I've identified based upon my emotions what I want to feel instead. And now, okay, how do I get there? What do I need to do to get there? As a Christian counselor, what I would say is I'm going to go back to scripture and I'm going to look at scripture and say, okay, what does scripture say about me having needs in relationships? Um, maybe what I need to look at is what other relationships, what other people have done, and what I've seen modeled in other healthy relationships. So I see my coworker who sets boundaries and says no to tasks, and she's still valued, and I believe she deserves to be able to say no. And so I also deserve to be able to say no.
I want to touch on something that you said because I also am a Christian. I grew up as a pastor's kid and also a missionary kid. I have been in a Christian church since I was old enough to be put in the nursery. And I found, as I mentioned earlier, I'm in my 50s. In my growing up years, there was not a lot of emphasis in church put on boundaries.
Absolutely.
There
Right.
was more emphasis put on giving of yourself, turning the other cheek.
Mhm.
And I think that I'm so glad that you brought up the spiritual component of this because you said to understand whether or not we deserve to have boundaries, we need to look at our spiritual beliefs. And I think that for many of us, our spiritual upbringing could have twisted a
Mhm.
little bit of our perspective on that. And so I just want to say to anybody that's listening now who is a Christian and can relate to what I'm saying, um, Jesus said no.
Absolutely, he did. He set boundaries all over the place.
He set boundaries constantly.
He
And
got angry.
he,
He got angry.
Mhm,
He did all sorts of things that maybe don't always align with what we believe we should do
that's
as a
right.
yeah.
He said no. He took time to be by himself.
Mhm.
He really was he was a rules breaker in a positive sense, and he put his relationship with God the Father as the highest priority regardless of what other people needed. And when I became more aware of how Jesus lived his life in that manner and that he set boundaries, it made it so much easier for me as a Christian and gave me freedom as a Christian to say, it's okay for me to say no.
Right. Absolutely. I think that is a really um, important topic that you brought up because I think that is a common misconception. There's this belief that we should selflessly give to others, and also that that is okay that it's at the expense of ourselves. And what he's shown us is that it's not okay for it to be at the expense of ourselves. There's the concept of the joyful giver. If I'm giving and giving, and that is not allowing me to be joyful in my giving any longer, if it feels like a burden to me, if I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling undervalued as a result of that, then that's not Christian either,
Yeah.
right? That's not what I want to do because I want to be joyful in whatever it is that I do. So, so there's freedom for us to be able to practice self-care. There's freedom for us to be able to practice self-love in Christianity.
Yeah, very much so. Mm,
And there's a wonderful book on that. There is, I don't know if you've read it. I bet you have, Alicia. Boundaries by
yes.
Henry Cloud and John Townsend. It's a
And
great book on just the basics of setting boundaries with others and why it's okay to be able to do that from a Christian perspective.
it's a groundbreaking book for me. Even though it's been years and years and years, it's totally relevant. Well, Megan, this has been fan freaking tastic. And before we wrap up, just a couple of questions. One, any other advice or suggestions that you would like to give to our adult class children?
What I would say is that you deserve to matter just because you are you and you matter. And so the decisions that you make, you get to make those decisions based upon the fact that you matter just as much as everybody else. And you may not know what that looks like, and that's okay to not know what that looks like. And also, we can think about, well, what might be healthy? And then let me try to choose that.
I love it. And we will make available in the show notes for people who would like to talk to you and maybe pursue a professional relationship with you, your information. You are licensed to practice in the state of Texas. Is that how it works? Okay. So if you are in the great state of Texas, Megan is a fabulous resource for you, and we'll make sure that we put her contact information in the show notes. Megan, this podcast has an international audience. So if somebody doesn't have the fortune of being able to work with you, how can they find someone who is a trauma-informed therapist?
Well, I think it's important to do your research. I think that if you feel comfortable doing so, asking for references from others who you trust, all of those things are beneficial. I think some of the things that are important to understand is that it's not a one size fits all. So you may try therapy with one person and decide that, that's not the relationship that you're looking for. Maybe that person y'all didn't jive with one another, and that's okay. And you can continue to try until you find that person who you do feel a connection with. You can look for someone who says that they are trauma informed. You can look for someone who says they are person centered. You can look for someone who says that they are attachment based. And I think all of those things might be beneficial keywords to find in whatever that person's biography is.
Yeah. I like that you said persistent, because it's rarely a one-hit wonder where you find somebody right off the bat and it's fantastic. And I hope that happens for some people. But as you said, sometimes you have to have some perseverance, which I know can be tough, because every time you start with a new therapist, you have to start over with your story. But finding that path to joy. How are you feeling? Remember, if you're struggling, reach out to a mental health professional. You do not have to do this alone. Thank you for being with me today, and don't forget to share this episode with your bestie, your therapist, your teachers, your minister. Sharing is caring, and hearing is healing. This is the I See Glass Children podcast. I'm Alicia Meneses Maples, and I see you. God sees you, and Jesus loves you.